Welcome to Mary McCorvey Experience Over Expectations podcast, which you can find on YouTube, Substack, and any place you find your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe today.
Welcome to Experience Over Expectation, the show where we encourage you to let go of the plan and live on your terms. Today, we're digging into the stories behind successful business strategies that can work in your personal life as well. Today's guest knows all about vision and how to bring it down from the sky into the boardroom and into your living room. Thom Boharsik is the co-founder and CEO of Outlaw Star Collective, a boutique consulting firm that helps organizations move with precision through transformation, strategy, and operations. Before Outlaw Star, Thom shaped high-stakes initiatives at Google, Accenture, and even the U.S. Air Force. Whether you're trying to figure out what works or doesn't work for you, the likelihood is Thom has been there. And today we're diving into his work, his philosophy, and his roadmap for meaningful success. Welcome to the show, Thom.
Thanks, Mary. Happy to be here.
Great. Well, Outlaw Star Collective is a pretty powerful name. What does being an outlaw in strategy and leadership mean to you?
Yeah, when my business partner and I were thinking about forming a business and taking a look at all the challenges we see in professional services, consulting, and the industries that get served by those, we realized that we really wanted to be more of that renegade identity and do something that is, out in the frontier, a little bit out on the fence, so to speak. And the outlaw identity is what came to us, and we felt very comfortable about that. And honestly, it's been a great hit with our clients as well.
That's great. Well, tell us about being renegade in your personal life. I mean,
Yeah.
there was a personal decision for you to name your business that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you take a look at my career path, I've always been a bit of a renegade. I joined the U.S. military, very much wanted to make my mark there, went into working with aircraft and, doing some global stuff there. So definitely trying to play against the odds, right? And when that was enough for me, I took a step back and I said, I love problem solving and really difficult, gnarly type situations. So I got into management consulting. And on top of that, I chose commercial banking. So I really got into complex things and challenging environments and whatnot. After that, I went to Google. And again, another set of complicated challenges. Again, that renegade mentality, right? I'm making these pivots. I'm trying to move my way through that. And had success there. And then I decided, you know what, I'm going to start my own businesses. So I actually started a combination of businesses in the time that I left Google. And that brings us here to today with Outlaw Star. So I feel like it's the culmination of just how I've kind of managed my life and my attitude and how I approach the world.
Well, that is amazing. Well, tell us about how you really see your business growing.
Yeah, I see our business with Outlaw Star really starting to get a foothold where some of the larger firms and some of the more traditional consulting practices were kind of just the only choice, right? It's not really a lot of other choices out there for alternatives to those when you need that high level strategy advisement and, some more of that intensive business mindset. And we wanted to be the difference. We wanted to offer something that is at a, much more accessible rate for many clients, especially in the small and medium business world that still need the same strategy conversations that the big firms need as well.
That's a
And we
long way
also,
from Accenture, isn't it?
it is very much so. Yeah, for sure. No issues would be for the Accenture, great firm, right? But we wanted to definitely offer a tier of service that would typically be inaccessible, right? So as we've started to scale and grow, we're getting more ingrained with those agribusinesses. I'm actually working with a restaurant group right now who is, figuring out their next growth strategy, right? Folks that typically would not be able to access this type of strategy and operations advisement, but they can now because we've decided to be the difference.
What in your experience, Google and Accenture and the U.S. Air Force are all very, very different ecosystems.
Yeah.
What allowed you to thrive in all three? What leadership traits?
Yeah, well, first, I don't think it's to be a surprise to anybody, is adaptability, right? And being light on my feet. I do my best to try to avoid biases. And what I mean by that is when I come into an organization or I go into a culture, we could call it that, the first thing I want to do is make sure that I'm leaving my ego out the door, right? Confirmation bias is a killer. We see this with executives all the time where they're like, ha, I've been here before. I know how this works. I'm just going to do it the same way. That doesn't work when you're shifting those cultures very quickly. Going from, more of a command and control style like the military to more of that matrix organization like a Google, things aren't comparable. You can't speak the same language as a military leader that you would inside of Google. But there are some things that are still true. Leadership and followership, just like you would learn in the military, is still a ever prevalent rule. And what I found is when I was a respectful person, when I was very clear with people and expectations, and I started to understand, leaving my biases aside, how to communicate with them effectively, we could really get some traction and some common ground. And that's how I started to explore these other, cultures compared to where I had been before, was knowing when to be quiet and listen, but also knowing when to show the way and kind of offer some guidance and help. So,
Excellent. So if I was to say to you, Thom, um, tell me what you learned at Google that can make my life better today.
yeah. Abandon perfection. That is one of the biggest things I think I learned at Google. Don't be afraid of the momentum. And what I mean by that is I think we spend so much time in the planning phase with much of our life, right? Because we feel it's safe. We feel like it's going to somehow protect us or get us there. The reality is that the risks that you're preparing for, you should prepare for them. I'm not saying don't, but don't be afraid to take the gamble. Don't be afraid to take some of the risks. If you break a few things along the way, you should trust yourself that you're going to figure out how to fix it when the time comes. So to give an example on that, in my personal life, my wife and I, we met when we were in our 30s, and we decided that we just really wanted to work on each other and see if we could get married and head that way. And things moved fairly fast. And I had a lot of friends that were like, "Hey, are you sure that you really want to do this?" And my point of view was that if my wife Kira and I are on the same page on our goals and our expectations, if we are willing to communicate with each other and just be honest about where we're feeling, both the good, bad, and the ugly, it's okay to move a little fast. It's okay to take that risk. And along the way, we checked in with each other and made sure we were good. And now we've been married for a few years and things are pretty great. So I don't regret taking that momentum. I don't regret taking those risks. And I don't know that I would have had that same mentality if I wasn't, building myself up to eventually go to a place like Google and then experiencing how Google thinks just about the world and its place and trying to enhance our lives, right? So don't fear the momentum. Run
Mhm.
it. Carpe diem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And of course, here at Experience Over Expectation, that is exactly, our mantra, right?
Yeah.
Well, my mantra is finite heartbeats, infinite possibilities. But along that way, when you are experiencing things along the path that we're raised, and that path is very straightforward. It's, you get your education, you get your career, you marry well, you have more career, you have kids, you retire, and you leave a legacy, right?
Yeah.
That's the path. And we get drawn into that
Yeah.
societally, as well as people in our families just want you to be okay,
Yep.
right? Everybody wants you to
Yep.
be okay. Everybody wants you to be happy. But when the questions come up about how really, yes, I do want to get married. Yes,
Yeah.
this is the woman for me. It's really a great step to let go of perfection, like you said,
Right.
which is the whole process of. It sounds like you circumvented a part of the process, the wedding, the years long engagement and all of that stuff. It's like, let's be together today.
Yep.
Let's make a life together today.
Yeah.
Tell
It's
me, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna just add, I think one of the things about carpe diem and that mentality, right? The momentum piece that often gets lost is the need for commitment. And this kind of going back to the marriage analogy, right? I made a commitment to my wife, back 2022. that we were going to be together and we're going to do all these great things. But it's every single morning and every single night when I reaffirm that commitment, whether it's spoken or it's in my actions or it's in my decisions or my mentality. And I think that's the thing about Carpe Diem in that way is we have to choose to commit to this. We have to go all in. We can't go halfsies. We've got to go all in. And so if I choose to grow with this person, if I choose to grow with this process or this job or this belief or this community, I've got to continuously commit to do that. I had a military colonel I worked for, and he had explained to me some of the challenges he had had in his marriage when he was younger. And the thing he told me was it's kind of like a sailboat. You know, there's going to be times when the winds are strong and your sails are up and you're just like, wow, like what a beautiful day. How amazing. There's going to be other days the wind is dead. You got to row. And the hardest
Mm-hmm.
part about rowing for anybody that's ever tried to do a two-person kayak, which is one thing I will be honest, my wife and I struggle to do, even with all of our communication, is making sure you're rowing in the same way. Make sure you're rowing at the same cadence, right? The same energy. That if someone is going to turn in the rowing process, that the other person's aware and helps, right? And doesn't detract that. So you've got to commit and you got to communicate that commitment. You got to be honest with yourself about it. So
Mm-hmm. Let's talk for a moment about servant leadership. So you served in the U.S. Air Force,
yeah,
and I'm a U.S. Army veteran. So you and I have that in common. And I won't hold it against you that you chose the country club service.
we love y'all anyway. We'll be in the
Yeah,
air conditioning where you need us. Yeah.
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. When I'm digging trenches, you're having a great cigar. So, so I work a lot with veterans, and I know that the transition from the military to the civilian life often leads a void of the feeling of serving in a higher mission,
Yeah.
right? How did you make that transformation yourself?
Wow. This is something I think about a lot. And I think, to your point, a ton of military veterans, after they leave, think about it. And I know I was leery about this when I was leaving the military, knowing that I had had friends that had left and said, hey, I don't know what I feel right now. The first thing I'll say is it's definitely a process, right? I don't want to say it's like grieving or healing. I don't think it's a process in that way per se, but it's definitely a process of evolving and adapting to where you're at now. Some people get out and they go into organizations that are very purpose or mission driven, whether that's a nonprofit or a business that does have a pretty cool mission or serves a cool industry, right? And they find that similar culture at home, right? And what the adaptation that they need to do is really just understand the professional rule book, corporate world and stick to that. But so many of us, the rest of us, go into these organizations where they just don't really care, right? They are very focused on shareholder value, or they're very focused on whatever they perceive to be value add, right, to the organization or to the industry. And that usually doesn't align with what a lot of veterans feel. So the first thing I started to do was find my community, find my tribe, right? I have never been to an organization that didn't have good, wholesome, values-focused people somewhere. Maybe they weren't being heard, maybe they were diminished. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you find that they're actually the leaders and they're just trying to process it to themselves. But find those people and stick with them and build community with them. You, as a veteran, have a very unique skill set that you're not going to realize until years after, and that is your ability to build community and foster it. I think that's something very special that we all learn. Mary, honestly, that's part of the reason why I think we're talking today, right? You and I, to your point, we have this in common, right? There's a bond there, and you can build that bond with other folks, not just veterans. You set the example by what you know. The other thing is don't be afraid to leave, right? And this kind of goes back to that renegade mentality. I wouldn't say I necessarily left Accenture because I hated it, but I definitely left it because there was parts of the value process at Accenture I wasn't totally on board with at times, especially as I got more senior over there. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with being more focused on value and driving, dollars to the business. That's the idea, right? Of capitalism.
Mm.
But there is something to be said about when you find your community and you really want to be values focused, you need to go seek that out. And that's part of the reason why I went to Google. Because Google is all about values, right? Very focused on that. And they certainly do their best to live by that. And so I definitely found more community there that's that way. But even then, I was kind of feeling like, this is my third point. I just really need to go build it myself. I really just want to
Mm-hmm.
go and I want to make my mark in the world and I want to express this out loud for what it is. And so that's what led me to being an entrepreneur was saying, I'm finding organizations that, they get close to the mark or they kind of hit it, but I want to build my own community now. I actually want to go out there and I want to take the risk and I want to build this out. And what that's led to for me is, kind of I was mentioning about finding your tribe. I've actually been able to physically build a tribe and a tribe that produces money, which is pretty cool, right?
It's
And it is
very
value
cool.
based. And that's, if you go to our website, that's our whole thing is just like we're doing this because we want to help people, not just necessarily make a buck. I mean, we can figure that out along the way, but we actually want to build a professional group that delivers on those values. So as a veteran, don't be afraid to go out there, learn how to do business, learn how to build, and then go build it. Go take it. Go make it. And, have your safety nets in place to make sure in case you fail, you're not financially ruined. But don't be afraid to take that risk. You've got it in you. Just learn what you need to do and go do it.
So there are less than 2% of Americans who are veterans, right? So the likelihood is that the majority of people listening and watching this podcast are not veterans.
Yeah.
So how do you take that same message and bring it? It's if I were not a veteran, I might say, well, I don't have that experience base.
Yeah.
I really don't relate.
Yeah.
And in fact, there are a lot of things that relate between veterans and civilians. And
Yeah.
talk to us about a couple of those.
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is definitely get to know a veteran if you can, right? Like to your point, that's 2% of Americans. So 2 out of 100, 1 out of 50 of the people that you know in your life is probably a vet in some way, right? Definitely get to know a veteran. Simply for the fact that they would love your community. And believe me, they would love to tell you all the stuff that I'm telling you to reaffirm that. The other thing is that we've seen such a huge explosion in leadership development in the past 20 years, right? The school of thought. I mean, you look at authors like Brene Brown and Adam Grant and Simon Sinek and all these folks. I mean, I can go onto my LinkedIn page and I've probably got Simon Sinek's face, popping up to greet me, right? Almost immediately. So I think a lot of the knowledge and the experience that veterans would have is slowly but surely becoming more and more common at least on how to build community and how to really seize the day and think of your vision and move forward, right? So don't be shy to look at some of those authors that are coming out to at least start you on the path, right? I don't know that they'll necessarily give you the answers, but they'll open some doors, right, to thought and how to go about it. The second thing is, and I think is very much in the spirit of the podcast too, definitely go out for the experience, experiment, right? If you feel like you are not living in a values-based organization or that the vision of the organization is missing that, the reality is that you could probably still help create that in some way. Now, I'm not saying you go to the CEO and you're like, hey, listen, we're going to make some changes around here, okay? I don't recommend doing that, at least that way. But there's nothing to say, hey, if you're on your operations team, right, or you're in your office environment, and you see the opportunity to go out of your way to do little things. Like seriously, it starts with lunch and learns. It starts with, having the coffee chats, right? It starts with changing the way you give feedback in an honest and transparent way, but in a compassionate and constructive way, right? All these little things are things that veterans, I think we just come to learn, but anyone is capable of doing. You just got to make sure your heart's in the right place and you're getting the right direction to do it. And that's why I say check these authors and talk to a vet for sure, right? If you want to
Mhm.
understand how to do that more, but you got
Sure.
it in you. If you have the ability to truly love others and love yourself, you have the ability to do this as well. It's just a matter of confidence and getting out there to commit to it.
Very, very nice. The um, the whole notion of going back to the military milieu, right?
Yeah,
There's more plans than we know what to do with, right? I
yeah,
mean, that's what the military does is it plans for plan A, it plans for the mission with a
yeah,
B and the C and the D plan when all the things go wrong.
yeah,
So then you go on the mission. right? And you're out there, and the first thing that happens is it doesn't go according to plan.
Yeah.
So, what is it that folks can take away from the reality of being in a situation? It doesn't necessarily have to be combat. It can
Yeah.
be something that just goes completely snafu, right? Which it is happens more often than not on a mission. I have a friend who was a CIA agent for 29 years. And there were days he would look at me and say, Mary, you look like you just came back from an operation. And the deal is that you train and you train and you train and you train. But then when you get out there, that training comes in handy, but you really, really need to make it happen on the ground.
Yeah.
So when all of the wedding plans have gone in place, when all of the college plans have gone in place, and then all of a sudden something happens and, the third rail shows up.
Yep. So there's always a step before planning that I think folks don't do enough. And this is true for personal life, business, whatever it is that you're doing that requires some degree of attention or complexity, right? It's the strategy, right? It's sitting back and thinking about what's the big so what here? What's my vision? And what I would advise to anybody is physically visualize you achieving the thing that you want so bad, right? For me this morning, it was daycare drop off. That was a nightmare this morning. I've got a 2-year-old. He's about to be 2 here in a few days. I've got a 7-month-old, and my wife has her work. We've got a 120-pound Bernese Mountain Dog who is more needy than the children somehow. And I was up late working, right? So all of these factors put together makes for an interesting morning. When I say that the plan goes out the window, and I think anybody that has kids will appreciate this, the plan goes out the window on a daily basis, right?
Right.
If we get close to the plan, I feel like I missed something because something surely must be going wrong. There must be something happening, right? But the strategy is what sustains me, right? At the end of the day, I visualize myself dropping my kids off relatively close to the time that I need to, getting myself home, getting myself fed, and sitting down and doing this wonderful interview this morning, right? That is how I start to visualize what I'm going to do. And setting a strategy is a practice skill. That's the other thing as well. I think a lot of folks don't realize is that you have to get purposeful about setting that vision, visualizing things, understanding what the big so what is. And if you can do that in the little things in life, it becomes so much easier in the bigger things in life. And when you start to hear like these pundits talk on, Bloomberg or CNN or Fox or whatever it is that you listen to, you'll start to understand why some of their perspectives come out the way that they do, because you realize that it's them setting strategy at the end of the day. It's them talking about vision, them talking about the big picture. So if I can have a strategy in place and I can understand what it is that I really want to achieve and how bad I want it, that's not just me getting ready for planning and having a sense for where I want to head, but it's also very motivating, right? Like there's nothing more motivating than if my strategy is to get candy and I visualize eating the candy, I'm going to be extremely motivated to go get that candy. It makes me hungry, right? It's the same thing in life with all the other goals that we have. So planning then actually just becomes a matter of making sure you've walked through the logistics of what you need to achieve, right? So for me, for daycare, it's kids, is there food available? Is the car getting ready? Is my wife not ripping her hair out again, right? Are we checking off those boxes? But planning also allows me to yet again kind of play through some more of the details of this visualization of this vision, right? And so then when it comes time to actually execute, when it comes time to get out there, to your point, Mary, the plan is going to go out the window. And that's okay, because the plan wasn't so much about the sequential steps. It wasn't about me having a really obvious way forward. It's more about I understand what the foundation of thought is. I have my strategy that tells me where I really do want to head towards and what motivates me about it and why I'm doing it. And now I can pivot in the moment. So maybe it's rearranging the order in which I got the kids ready. Maybe it's accepting that I'm going to help my wife with something really quickly and defer some of my own morning activity, right? I can swap these things around. And at the end of the day, I still see the vision. I still know what the goal is. and I still have a general sense for logistically what may or may not be missing, right? And then I can decide whether I want to do it or not. When we talk about really complex things like, me managing a software delivery implementation or managing aircraft in an airspace, right? When we're going to war, stuff like that, that's just like really tough and challenging. The strategy still holds true. The idea of the plan still holds true. The idea of execution and things getting hairy in the moment is all that much more clear, right? But now I've given myself the preparation and the ability to step through it, and I'm not so worried about the risks because I have an idea on how I'm going to handle it. The final piece I'll add is training. Definitely, the more you practice, the more you do, the better off you're going to be. And that is the paramount, right? If I really practice my professional skill or my personal skills, then I'm that much more ready for when not only does the plan go out the window, but we're in a completely different area, right? Like what happens when the strategy has to change. Training is going to save your day on that. So don't ever pass up a moment to learn more, to get sharper what you do. When you arrive at more of that expert/master type level, you'll know, because that's when you'll be able to see the strategy changing before your eyes and it doesn't faze you. So.
Wonderful. Well, as we're coming to time here, is there anything else, any other thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yeah, just, life is a gift and we only have so many moments to live it. And I've seen so many good people spend so many years just kind of worried about the plan and about the steps and about the risks and all the things. And for the ones that have decided to really go out there and commit and seize the day, take the experience, run with it, they have lived much more enriched lives. Even if they saw danger, even if they saw risks and peril, they love themselves more for it and they were able to achieve great things. And that's not just true for veterans, that's true for everybody, right? So the thing I would just say is don't be afraid to get out there, go get it, right? Be that renegade, challenge the norm, be the person that you feel like you need to be.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Thom. Thom Boharsik of the Outlaw Star Collective, a U.S. Air Force veteran, veteran of Google and Accenture, and now helping many businesses in his own consulting practice. We really appreciate you joining us today, Thom. And for everyone, let go of the plan. Live by your own terms. Until next time.
You've been listening to Mary McCorvey's Experience Over Expectations podcast. Be sure to subscribe today on YouTube and Substack, or listen wherever you find your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in.